I asked my best friend to engage in an affair with my wife as part of a plan to access her finances. However, he ended up taking the money and remaining with my wife instead. In the dim light of the old, oak-paneled study, Daniel sat contemplating his next move. His fingers drummed a steady rhythm on the mahogany desk, a telltale sign of his restless mind at work. Across from him, lounged Luke, his childhood friend and confidant, whose easygoing demeanor contrasted starkly with Daniel's intense gaze. "Look, it's simple," Daniel began, his voice low and persuasive. "Scarlett's hiding something, Luke. I've seen the signs. Secret phone calls, unexplained bank statements. I'm telling you, she's got a stash of cash somewhere, and I intend to find out where." Luke raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "And what do you want from me?" he asked, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes glinting with a cunning plan. "I need you to get close to Scarlett. Charm her, seduce her if you must. I need someone on the inside to find out what she's hiding." Luke set his glass down, the seriousness of the request dawning on him. "Daniel, she's your wife. Isn't this a bit extreme?" "Extreme times call for extreme measures," Daniel retorted sharply. "Besides, it's not like I haven't noticed how you look at her. This could be your chance, and you'd be helping me in the process." The room fell into a tense silence. Luke's mind raced with the moral implications of what was being asked of him. He had known Scarlett for as long as he had known Daniel. They had all grown up together in this sleepy town, their lives intertwining like the ivy on the old brick walls of their school. But the look in Daniel's eyes was one he had seen many times before. It was the look of a man desperate and determined, a dangerous combination. Finally, Luke sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Fine, I'll do it. But not for the reasons you think. I'm doing this because I care about Scarlett, and if there's something she's hiding, maybe she needs help, not a spy." Daniel's lips curled into a satisfied smile. "Excellent. Just remember, I need evidence. Bank statements, passwords, anything you can get your hands on." As Luke stood up to leave, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in the pit of his stomach. He glanced back at Daniel, who was already lost in thought, plotting his next move in the high-stakes game he had just set in motion. Outside, the night air was cool and crisp, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere of the study. Luke took a deep breath, trying to dispel the guilt that gnawed at him. He had just agreed to betray a friend, a woman he had known and respected for years. But as he walked away, the image of Scarlett's smile, warm and unsuspecting, haunted him. What had he just gotten himself into? The night stretched on, and the once quiet streets of their town seemed to whisper secrets in the shadows. Secrets that Luke was now a part of, whether he liked it or not. The days that followed were a blur of calculated encounters and clandestine meetings. Luke, who had once been a frequent and welcome guest in Daniel and Scarlett's home, now felt like an intruder, stepping into a world he had no right to disturb. But his resolve, fueled by Daniel's insistence and his own growing curiosity, pushed him forward. Scarlett, ever graceful and unsuspecting, welcomed Luke with open arms, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. Their conversations, once filled with laughter and reminiscences of shared childhood memories, now had an undercurrent of tension, at least on Luke's part. As he spent more time with Scarlett, Luke found himself increasingly torn. She was not the cunning schemer Daniel had made her out to be. Instead, he saw a woman of depth and kindness, someone caught in the web of Daniel's unfounded suspicions. Her laughter, her genuine interest in his life, her subtle vulnerabilities, they all made Luke question the morality of his actions. One evening, as they sat in the lush garden under the starlit sky, Scarlett's tone shifted to something more somber. "You know, Luke, I've always considered you a true friend, not just Daniel's," she said, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "But lately, I feel like you're holding something back. Is everything okay?" Luke's heart raced. This was his chance to come clean, to abandon the deceit. But the words of confession froze in his throat. Instead, he masked his guilt with a smile. "Everything's fine, Scarlett. Just some work stress, I guess." Scarlett nodded, though her eyes held a glint of unconvinced concern. She reached out, placing a gentle hand on his. "If there's ever anything you need, I'm here," she said earnestly. That touch, innocent and comforting, sparked a realization in Luke. He saw Scarlett not as a target but as a person, a friend who was being wronged by the very people she trusted. He withdrew his hand, the weight of his betrayal heavier than ever. The next day, Luke confronted Daniel. "I can't do this anymore," he declared, his voice firm. "Scarlett isn't hiding anything. This is wrong, Daniel, and I won't be a part of it." Daniel's reaction was swift and cold. "You're in too deep to back out now, Luke. Remember, you agreed to this. You owe me." The words hung heavy between them, a reminder of the pact that had entangled their lives in a web of deceit. But as Luke left Daniel's presence, a plan began to form in his mind. A plan not to uncover Scarlett's non-existent secrets, but to protect her from the man who had been his friend. He would play along with Daniel's game, but on his terms. That night, under the guise of yet another friendly visit, Luke sat down with Scarlett. With a heavy heart, he began to weave a story, a fictitious tale of financial troubles and fake bank accounts. It was a risky move, but if it could keep Daniel at bay and protect Scarlett, it was a risk he was willing to take. As the story unfolded, Scarlett listened, her expression one of disbelief and concern. Luke could only hope that his plan would work, that he could shield her from the storm that was about to break. Daniel's patience was wearing thin. The once clear-cut plan he had devised was now muddled with delays and excuses. Each day that passed without concrete evidence against Scarlett added to his frustration. He couldn't understand why Luke, who had always been reliable, was suddenly faltering in his resolve. On a particularly overcast afternoon, Daniel decided to confront Luke. He found him in his apartment, a space that once echoed with the camaraderie of their friendship but now seemed cold and distant. "What's going on, Luke? It's been weeks, and you've given me nothing substantial," Daniel demanded, his voice laced with suspicion. Luke, who had been expecting this confrontation, maintained his composure. "I'm doing what I can, Daniel. Scarlett isn't easy to crack. She's more cautious than you think." Unconvinced, Daniel paced the room, his mind racing with doubts and conjectures. It was then that he noticed Luke's laptop, left carelessly open on the coffee table. Acting on a hunch, Daniel quickly glanced over the screen. His eyes widened as he saw an email draft addressed to Scarlett. The message detailed their entire plan, exposing his intentions and warning Scarlett of his deceit. Enraged, Daniel confronted Luke. "You traitor. You were planning to tell her everything." Luke, caught off guard, tried to explain, but his words fell on deaf ears. Daniel, consumed by a sense of betrayal, saw this as the ultimate act of treachery. In a fit of anger, he stormed out, leaving Luke to grapple with the aftermath of his discovery. The following days were tense. Daniel's trust in Luke had been shattered, and with it, their plan. He began to surveil Scarlett himself, convinced that both she and Luke were plotting against him. He followed her to work, eavesdropped on her phone conversations, and scoured her personal belongings for any hint of hidden wealth. However, Scarlett seemed oblivious to his suspicions. She continued her routine, unaware of the invisible eyes that tracked her every move. Daniel's obsession with unveiling her secret consumed him, blinding him to the reality of their crumbling marriage. One evening, as he sifted through Scarlett's documents, he found a bank statement that caught his eye. It showed a substantial withdrawal made weeks ago. His heart raced as he pieced together the puzzle. This had to be the proof he was looking for. Armed with the bank statement, Daniel confronted Scarlett. He accused her of hiding assets and demanded an explanation. Scarlett, shocked and hurt by the accusation, denied any wrongdoing. The argument escalated, with accusations and hurtful words exchanged. In the heat of the moment, Scarlett admitted to the withdrawal but explained it was for a surprise she had been planning for their anniversary. She had wanted to book a vacation, a desperate attempt to rekindle the love that once defined their marriage. Daniel, faced with the truth, felt a wave of guilt and confusion wash over him. His quest for hidden wealth had blinded him to the simple truths of their life together. But his pride and suspicion wouldn't allow him to accept his mistake. The confrontation ended with Scarlett in tears and Daniel more determined than ever to prove his suspicions. The rift between them grew wider, a chasm filled with mistrust and broken promises. As Daniel lay awake that night, the realization of his actions began to dawn on him. He had set in motion a series of events that threatened to destroy everything he held dear. But it was a realization that came too late, for the seeds of doubt and betrayal had already been sown. The days following the confrontation were marked by a chilling silence in the once warm and lively home of Daniel and Scarlett. Daniel's obsession with proving Scarlett's alleged deceit had turned into a relentless quest, consuming every waking moment of his life. Daniel's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He spent hours reviewing bank statements, following Scarlett's every move, and searching through her personal belongings when she was away. His once successful career began to suffer as he neglected his responsibilities, his thoughts fixated solely on unearthing the truth he believed was hidden from him. Luke, who had been watching this downward spiral from a distance, felt a growing sense of responsibility for the chaos he had helped unleash. He tried to reach out to Daniel, to reason with him, but Daniel's distrust and anger had erected an impenetrable barrier between the two old friends. Scarlett, for her part, became a shell of her former self. The constant accusations and lack of trust had taken a toll on her. She moved through her days like a ghost, her vibrant spirit dimmed by the dark cloud hanging over their marriage. As Daniel's life unraveled, he began to lose more than just his sanity. His professional reputation suffered, leading to a demotion at work. His friends, once a tight-knit circle, distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with his increasingly paranoid behavior. The tipping point came one evening when Daniel, convinced he had finally found the conclusive evidence he needed, staged a dramatic confrontation. He accused Scarlett of having an affair with Luke and hiding assets to leave him penniless. The accusation was baseless, a product of his warped mind, but it was the final straw for Scarlett. She could no longer live under the same roof with a man who saw her as nothing more than a deceitful adversary. She left that night, taking only a few personal belongings. Daniel's world, already teetering on the edge, crumbled. He had lost the woman he once loved, his best friend, and the life he had built. But instead of introspection, he delved deeper into his obsession, convinced that his downfall was the result of a grand conspiracy orchestrated by Scarlett and Luke. His home became a fortress of solitude, walls lined with photos and documents, strings connecting different pieces of evidence, in a chaotic web. Daniel's once sharp mind was now lost in a maze of suspicion and conspiracy theories. Meanwhile, Luke watched in despair as his friend's life fell apart. Guilt gnawed at him for his role in this tragedy. He had tried to protect Scarlett, but in doing so, he had inadvertently pushed Daniel over the edge. In a last-ditch effort to save his friend from total ruin, Luke reached out to Daniel's family, hoping they could intervene. But when they arrived, they found a man who was a shadow of his former self, lost in a world of his own making. As they tried to coax him back to reality, Daniel railed against them, accusing them of being part of the conspiracy. It was then that the heartbreaking truth became clear: Daniel had lost not only his marriage and his friend but also his grip on reality. The chapter closes with Daniel sitting alone in his study, surrounded by the chaos of his obsession, a tragic figure consumed by his own unfounded suspicions. The once vibrant life Daniel had led now lay in ruins, a casualty of his own unchecked suspicions and relentless pursuit of a truth that never existed. The walls of his study, plastered with convoluted charts and photographs connected by red strings, served as a testament to his descent into madness. His professional life had deteriorated beyond repair. He had been forced to take an indefinite leave from his job after a series of incidents where his paranoia spilled over into confrontations with colleagues. Friends, once a constant presence, had retreated, unwilling to engage with the shell of the man Daniel had become. Scarlett, who had found refuge in a friend's home, filed for divorce. The proceedings were quick, as Daniel showed little interest in contesting anything. His obsession had eclipsed even the remnants of his love for her. She walked away with a heavy heart, mourning the loss of the man she once loved, now a stranger consumed by delusions. Luke, carrying the burden of guilt, watched from a distance. He had hoped that Scarlett's departure might jolt Daniel back to reality, but it only seemed to push him further into the abyss. Luke's attempts to reach out were met with hostility and accusations. The bond they once shared, strong and unyielding, was now irreparably broken. As the divorce was finalized, Daniel became a recluse, his world confined to the four walls of his home. He spent his days and nights scouring through his evidence, trying to piece together a conspiracy that existed only in his mind. One evening, as a storm raged outside, Daniel sat in his study, the glow of his desk lamp casting long shadows. The room was silent except for the rustle of papers and the occasional murmur of his voice, articulating connections only he could understand. The phone rang, shattering the silence. It was a call from his brother, the first in many weeks. His brother's voice, laced with concern, offered a lifeline back to reality. He spoke of family, of the help available, of a chance to start anew. But Daniel, trapped in his delusional world, dismissed the offer, declaring that he was close to uncovering the truth. After the call, Daniel's gaze returned to the chaotic web on the wall. His eyes, once bright with intelligence, now reflected a haunting emptiness. The pursuit of a non-existent truth had cost him everything: his wife, his friend, his career, and now, his sanity. The chapter closes on a poignant note, with Daniel alone in his study, the storm outside mirroring the turmoil within. The man who had once had everything, a loving wife, a successful career, a loyal friend, had lost it all to an obsession born of unfounded jealousy and paranoia. In the final lines, Daniel is seen reaching out to touch the web of photos and strings, a solitary figure lost in a world of his own making. The story of his life, once filled with promise and joy, had ended in desolation, a powerful reminder of the destructive power of unchecked suspicion and the fragility of the human mind.